White neighbors thought they could use their dog to harass a black woman. You won't believe what happened next. Tasha Harper stood on her porch, sipping coffee as the morning sun bathed her modest suburban home in golden light. Her garden was her sanctuary, a patchwork of vibrant marigolds, fragrant lavender, and neatly trimmed rose bushes that framed the small yard like a living painting. It wasn't just plants. It was hours of labor, love, and escape from the chaos of life. She lived here with her husband Marcus and their 8-year-old son Elijah, who loved chasing butterflies among the blooms. Maplewood Lane, their quiet cul-de-sac in the heart of Willow Creek, had always felt safe, even idyllic. But lately, something gnawed at Tasha's peace, a creeping unease she couldn't quite name. Still, she cherished this place, its tree-lined streets and close-knit vibe, or so she thought. The sound of barking broke her reverie. Across the street, Sandra Whitmore's golden retriever bounded through an open gate, tail wagging wildly as it sniffed around Tasha's mailbox. Tasha sighed, watching the dog trot back towards Sandra's immaculate lawn without a care. For now, it seemed harmless enough, a stray bark, a wandering paw. But deep down, Tasha knew boundaries mattered, and hers were about to be tested. It started subtly, almost innocuously. One Saturday morning, as Tasha knelt by her flowerbeds, pulling weeds, she heard the soft thud of paws landing on her grass. Looking up, she spotted Max, Sandra's golden retriever, happily digging near her prized hydrangeas. Dirt flew everywhere, and Tasha froze, heart sinking. "Max," she called out, rising to her feet. The dog paused, ears perked, before bounding away, just as Sandra appeared at her doorway, sipping a latte. "Oh, sorry." Sandra waved casually. "He's such a free spirit." Tasha forced a smile, brushing soil from her hands. "No problem," she replied, though irritation prickled beneath her calm exterior. She walked over later that afternoon, carrying freshly baked cookies, a peace offering and an opportunity to mention the incident lightly. "I hope Max didn't cause too much trouble earlier," Sandra said with a laugh when she opened the door. "He's fine," Tasha assured her, handing over the plate. "But maybe we could keep him on your side? I've been working hard on the garden." Sandra nodded absently, already turning back inside. "Of course. Don't worry about it." For a week, things seemed better, or so Tasha hoped. But then came another intrusion. 2 dogs this time, including Mr. Hargrove's bulldog from next door, trampling her newly planted tulips. Frustration bubbled up again, sharper now. When she approached both neighbors politely, they dismissed her concerns. "Dogs will be dogs," Mr. Hargrove shrugged. Each attempt to resolve the issue felt like hitting a brick wall. Their indifference stung, planting seeds of doubt in Tasha's mind. Was this really going to stop, or would it only get worse? The intrusions grew bolder, more frequent. It wasn't just Max or the bulldog anymore. Now, there were 3, sometimes 4 dogs barreling in her yard at all hours. Tasha would step outside to find muddy paw prints staining her porch, flower stems snapped like twigs, and even a pile of droppings near Elijah's toy box. Her once pristine garden looked like a war zone. Marcus noticed her growing tension one evening as she scrubbed dirt off the welcome mat for the 3rd time that week. "You okay?" he asked gently, leaning against the doorframe. "No," Tasha snapped, then sighed, softening. "I'm sorry. It feels like they don't care. Like my space doesn't matter." "It's not your fault," Marcus said firmly, but his words offered little comfort. The breaking point came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Tasha had spent hours replanting lavender bushes, determined to restore some semblance of order. As she stood back admiring her work, she heard the unmistakable sound of paws squelching through mud. Through the window, she saw Max leading the pack again, tearing straight through her newly repaired flower bed. Her heart pounded as she grabbed her raincoat and stormed outside. "What are you doing?" she shouted, startling the dogs, who scattered. Sandra emerged from her house, umbrella in hand, looking annoyed. "Tasha, what's the big deal?" "They're just playing." "The big deal." Tasha's voice trembled with barely contained fury. "Your dog is destroying everything I've worked for. You promised this wouldn't happen again." Sandra rolled her eyes. Maybe if you didn't make such a fuss about a little dirt. A little dirt? Tasha cut her off, incredulous. This isn't about dirt. It's about respect. My home matters. But Sandra simply turned away, muttering something about being too sensitive. That night, Tasha sat alone in the living room, staring at the ruined garden through the rain-streaked window. Her hands clenched into fists as tears welled up, not of sadness, but of anger. Enough was enough. Something had to change, and if no one else would respect her boundaries, she'd have to enforce them herself. The final straw came on a crisp Saturday morning. Tasha had woken early to plant a row of delicate petunias, a small act of defiance against the chaos that had overtaken her yard. She'd barely finished when she heard it, barking, followed by the unmistakable crash of something heavy hitting the ground. Rushing outside, she froze in disbelief. Her garden was a disaster. The petunias were crushed underfoot, their fragile stems snapped like twigs. A large hole gaped where her rose bushes used to be, and muddy paw prints trailed across her freshly laid mulch. Worst of all, Elijah's favorite butterfly wind chime lay shattered in pieces near the fence. Tasha's chest tightened as rage surged through her veins. This wasn't just carelessness anymore. It felt personal. She marched over to Sandra's house first, fists clenched at her sides. "Do you see what her dog has done?" Tasha demanded, pointing toward the wreckage. Sandra blinked lazily, sipping coffee on her porch. "Relax, Tasha. It's just plants. Just plants." Tasha's voice cracked with emotion. "This is my home, my family space. How would you feel if someone trashed your perfect little lawn?" Sandra shrugged dismissively. "Maybe you should get a fence or something." The casual indifference hit Tasha like a slap. She turned away before she said something she'd regret, but inside, something shifted. Enough pleading. Enough patience. That evening, Tasha sat at the kitchen table with Marcus, sketching out a plan. "We'll install an ultrasonic repeller," she said firmly. "It won't hurt them, but it'll keep them away. And we'll plant thorny bushes along the fence line, something they can't ignore." Marcus nodded, seeing the determination in her eyes. Together, they ordered the equipment online and mapped out the perimeter. Over the next few days, Tasha worked tirelessly, planting hedges of sharp hyracantha and mounting the sleek device on their fence posts. Each step felt cathartic, a reclaiming of control. By the time they finished, the yard looked fortified, but not unwelcoming. Tasha stood back, arms crossed, surveying her handiwork. If this didn't send a message, nothing would. The first test came sooner than expected. Early Monday morning, Tasha sipped tea by the window when she heard familiar barking. Max appeared at the edge of her yard, tail wagging as he approached the fence. But as soon as he stepped within range of the ultrasonic repeller, his ears flattened, and he let out a startled yelp. He scrambled backward, scrambling through the grass like a frightened rabbit before darting back to Sandra's yard. Tasha allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. By midweek, the other dogs had learned the hard way too. Mr. Hargrove's bulldog growled suspiciously at the thorny bushes but retreated after snagging his collar on a branch. Even the neighbor 2 doors down, whose terrier often joined the chaos, seemed to get the message. The once constant parade of intruders vanished entirely. But it wasn't just the dogs who reacted. Sandra stormed over one afternoon, hands on her hips. "What did you do?" she demanded. "Max won't come near your house anymore." "I installed an ultrasonic device," Tasha replied calmly, not looking up from her gardening gloves. "And those are thorny bushes along the fence. They're called boundaries." Sandra huffed, clearly annoyed. "You didn't have to go this far. This is ridiculous." "Neither did you," Tasha shot back, finally meeting her gaze. "You ignored my request for months. Now, maybe you'll understand how it feels to have your space disrespected." For a moment, Sandra looked like she might argue further, but instead, she turned on her heel and left. Over the next few days, whispers rippled through Maplewood Lane. Some neighbors grumbled about Tasha's extreme measures, while others quietly admired her resolve. Elijah noticed the change immediately, running barefoot through the yard without fear of muddy paws ruining his games. As peace settled over their home, Tasha felt a weight lift, a quiet triumph that reminded her she'd done what was necessary. Still, She wondered if the lesson would stick, or if this was merely a temporary ceasefire. Weeks passed, and the garden thrived in its newfound tranquility. The marigolds bloomed brighter than ever, their fiery orange petals swaying gently in the breeze. Elijah's laughter echoed through the yard as he played with his toy cars on the porch steps, free from interruptions. For the first time in months, Tasha felt a deep sense of calm, not just because her space was protected, but because she'd stood firm when it mattered most. One crisp afternoon, Sandra approached Tasha hesitantly as she watered her flowers. "Look," Sandra began, fidgeting with her keys, "I know I wasn't great about the whole dog thing, but wanted to say thanks for not calling animal control or anything." Tasha raised an eyebrow, surprised by the rare acknowledgement. "You're welcome," she said evenly. "But honestly, Sandra, this wasn't about punishment. It was about respect for my home, my family, and my peace of mind." Sandra nodded slowly, looking genuinely thoughtful. "I get that now. I'll make sure Max stays put from here on out." Though Tasha doubted Sandra would fully grasp the weight of her words, she appreciated the gesture. Over time, the neighborhood dynamic shifted subtly. Neighbors who once dismissed her concerns now greeted her with cautious respect. As Tasha reflected on everything that had transpired, she realized how much strength it took to enforce boundaries, especially when others refused to see them. Yet standing up for herself hadn't made her unkind. It had simply affirmed her worth. Have you ever faced a situation where your boundaries were ignored? What did you do? Share your experience in the comments. If you enjoyed this and want more content on Inspiring Black Stories channel like this, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Thanks for watching.